Good morning, everyone. Jim Clarke here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary in Central Virginia to share another contemplation with you and a little insight into a holistic lifestyle and a life revolving around meditation. Okay? So, the topic for today is, of course, are you open to the miracle of life? The simple mechanics of how we create and experience our world. So, when I was preparing for this sharing today, one memory came to me, and it was a most appropriate memory, so I'm going to share it with you. And it was a memory that goes way back to my preschool years when I was probably 6 years old, 5 years old, something like that. It was before I went to school, so it had to be about five. Anyway, the memory was sitting in a front lawn on a nice warm spring morning in the grass, and I noticed lawn daisies. That's what we used to call them back then anyway. Little daisy flowers that would pop up in the grass sporadically here and there, but they were such a contrast to the green grass and very colorful that I remember I was very focused on them when I first discovered them for the first time in my life. And in that moment, I was just elated just from that experience alone. A seemingly insignificant experience, and yet internally I was uplifted and very joyous just from having that experience. So, what happened after that? The enculturation process. I went to school. I started to learn how to read and write and do mathematics and so forth. I was getting the tools that I needed to go through life with. But in that process, what happens, What happens is that we are exposed to myriad beliefs and ideas, and then we become attached to those ideas. We're learning the tools to survive. And then along the way, we're also learning different ideas that come with that learning process, and we become attached to them, whatever they might be. They could be religious, they could be political, or they could just be philosophical, whatever. Doesn't matter. Our identity becomes glued to these ideas. And so the mind gets very busy because we're using our mind to learn with, right? And we develop the thinking processes that we have to develop in order to survive, especially in the world today. And in the process of that moment that I just described can no longer happen because the mind is so busy. It simply cannot, it overwhelms our internal experience. And then what the message was I got when I was sitting in that lawn was really coming from my heart. It was not something, because I was too young and to be attached to anything in particular, and I was fascinated with life itself, and I was living from my heart just naturally, as children do. And so the point of that sharing is simply to demonstrate or illustrate what happens as we grow up and become educated and get into the world and start living a human life. Prior to that, we're really more in touch with being spiritual beings having a human experience, because the heart, which is connected to our truth and always speaks the truth to us in different ways than the mind would attempt to do, cannot communicate consciously with us as long as we are locked into a busy mind and attached to all these identifications based upon ideas that we bought into as we were growing up, which is a process. You can't avoid it. You have to grow up. That's part of the human journey. So what you experience in your life is the projection that comes through you as it's filtered with all these attachments, all these beliefs and ideas that you become identified with. And that's the world that you will see. And it's usually kind of a mix. There are some things that are very nice and some things that are joyous. but there's also a lot of things that are negative and a lot of things that you don't like at all, and yet you seemingly have no control over it. To you, it's a reality that's beyond your control. It's a reality that comes from the outside that you have to deal with. And so this is the way I experienced life up until I started meditating on a regular basis and learning how to change my experience of life therein. It wasn't overnight, but it did happen, and I knew it was going to happen. After I meditated for a while, I realized that there was something really great going on, but there was a process I had to go through to get to the other side, to get back to that sitting in the lawn and being just enamored with life itself. And that's what meditation is, and why part of the description in this sharing is when we meditate. Because when we meditate, we undo the attachments that we had to the ideas, and we get back in touch over time with the heart, our heart, that's also communicating with our spiritual side of our existence. So, and once we do that, once we get established with that connection again, the same kind of amazement of life itself begins to unfold, and we begin to see newly just how miraculous life is. On the one hand, you start to realize how you don't control the events outside of yourself. But you also realize in the process that you don't have to control the events on the outside to experience the bliss of life itself on the inside. It's your nature. And as you create the balance that's created through meditation, so that the heart is communicating with you again on a conscious level, the unconscious aspects that you used to suffer through to survive on a fear-based mode begin to dissipate and be disempowered. And as this happens, your experience of life becomes independent of what's going on the outside, and depends more on what's going on the inside, because the inside is telling you, it's giving you a perspective of life itself in any given moment through your true nature, the nature of being blissful consciousness, of being joyous, of celebrating the fact that there is life and you're participating in life as a human being, which is a huge experience. It's a great experience because human beings have the capacity for self-reflection. They have the capacity to choose in the first place. And if meditation comes into your life, if you are in any way whatsoever inclined to experiment with meditation, if you're not meditating, this is a sign that you have developed yourself and you've evolved yourself to the point where the normal illusory attachments that people seem to get tied into and never escape are weakening inside yourself. And so you're able to actually consider that there might be something more. There might be something more to life than what you've experienced, and you want to at least experiment with something that is always described as a tool to create the balance that you need to experience life in a way that is holistic, which by its very nature, of course, is very blissful and very celebratory, life affirmative. And if you gravitate in that direction and then you start to meditate, you will start to have experiences that will validate the power of meditation, the power that you have in you when you apply that focus to yourself. Then the busy mind slows down and it starts to relax. The heart starts to become more dominant in your experience, and the feeling of love, first for yourself and then for your world, begins to emerge as you free yourself up from what you once thought was a reality that was chiseled in stone, that you had no control over, and that it was real. Whereas the reality of such a world depended upon you giving your power to it. So from the spirit comes the illusion. We play the game of illusion until we're done with the illusion. Then we start to undo the illusion. But in that whole process, nothing really has to change. You're still a human having a human experience, and that is the miracle. Every moment, this moment right here, sitting here sharing this sharing, is a miracle. It's like when I observe life in any given set of circumstances, I'm always amazed at how it moves through and creates itself newly in ways that could never be predicted and ways that nobody could ever control. And yet it happens, and it happens in concert with you, because you are the life that you're having, and you are orchestrating your version of life because it fits the picture that life is creating for everybody. Everybody has a unique version of what life is and how it is and so forth, and yet it all plays together. And that is a miracle beyond description to begin with. And I know from my own experiences that through the years of meditating here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary, I had to go through a lot of processes as I was becoming aware of where my illusions were coming up, in contrast to what my meditations were bringing up, which was breakthrough moments where I could have insights and experiences of truthful me, of the spiritual me. And they were always very blissful. But after those experiences, the memories and the attachments that still were in me had to be released. And that sometimes is a little bit of an uncomfortable process, but life before I meditated was not a comfortable process either. There was many times where I was up against a wall. I was living in fear or desperation for money, for a job, for a relationship, or something, right, outside myself, which I had no control over. And that's what a lot of people live, and it's not a joyous life. So why continue? Why keep going down that road when you do have a choice? And the only reason for that is that you don't see it as a choice. Maybe you're not ready to go that route yet. Maybe you haven't had quite enough of fear-based living to say, okay, enough of that. I don't care what it is, but I'm going to try anything that will improve my life, that will elevate my life to something celebratory and worth living. So, and this is basically what happened to me too. Long after I could no longer be thrilled at the look of a lawn daisy, when I was thoroughly immersed in my own illusions that I had picked up along the way of life experiences, and miserable in that, I still had a choice, and that choice happened, okay? It happened because I was ready for it. And I think that in this day and age, we're seeing a time when many people are ready for that now. This is why things are happening the way they're happening, because it provides an impetus for people to explore the possibility of living the miracle of life as opposed to the drudgery of life or the fear of life. And I'm hoping that many, many people will see that and take up the challenge and discover for themselves how truly miraculous their life really is. And that's what I wanted to share with you on this fine Monday morning. And I'll be back again next Monday to share something more with you. So thank you, and I hope you get something of value out of this little sharing here.